Welcome to the 902 Podcast, the official podcast of the Lancaster County Sheriff's Office in Lincoln, Nebraska. I'm Captain Vik, and I want to thank you for listening. This podcast will give you an inside look at LSO with topics and guests to discuss public safety issues impacting Lancaster County. Be sure to follow the 902 Podcast for highlights on news, cases, and the people working for you at LSO. You can also follow us across social media at LSO Nebraska on Facebook, X, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Welcome to the 902 Podcast. Back in studio today to talk about a timely topic, wildfires, and nobody better to talk about it than our own deputy and also Hickman Fire Chief, Deputy John Brady. Thanks for being here, John.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Got the applause in the background. Sheriff Wagner here.
Good morning.
And Chief Deputy Houchin, thanks for being here.
Yeah, good afternoon.
So, John, we talked to you already on episode 12. If people go back and listen to that, they can hear a little bit about your background. But you've got somewhat of a fire background. You were from California originally.
Yes, sir.
And obviously there's some California fires that are in the news right now.
Yes.
And how did you get involved in the fire scene originally?
So I grew up just east of those fires, actually, in the valley.
Okay.
But the fire scene in Southern California is actually pretty big. It's a big deal. We get them all the time. Like I was telling you guys earlier, just sit and watch those things on our roof. They go off, so we could sit on our roofs and actually watch those things crest the hills and the mountains. So fire has always kind of been a big deal to me, I guess. Unlike any other kid, I grew up either wanting to be a football player or a fireman, to be honest with you. Mm-hmm. A very good family friend of ours was a battalion chief in Orange County Fire Authority. I know. And so at a pretty young age, at age 11, I became a fire explorer for the Orange County Fire Authority.
Okay.
So pretty young, I was basically in that firehouse every day. I was that annoying kid that was always in the firehouse trying to do something.
Yeah.
And then that just kind of continued to grow. It was very difficult in the 80s to become a fireman. For I think if I remember the numbers right, for every application there was like 10,000 applicants. It was just super, super difficult to do.
Okay.
Which was one of the reasons that I went into the military to get that experience.
Yeah.
Did firefighting in the military as well as anybody on a ship does, is trained in the fire service to fight fires on ship and on board. And then when I came out, my very first job out of there was working for EMS departments around Southern California until I was hired on by Hermosa Beach Fire Department.
Okay.
Where I was there for about 2 years before I moved here to Nebraska and changed teams.
Yeah. Now you're on the blue side.
Now I'm on the blue side.
Okay.
That's right.
Well, we're glad you're here, but it helps out with somebody with your background in house, especially when wildfires are in the news. We're it's terrible for the people in California right now, but we're glad that it's not going on here. But it doesn't mean that they don't happen here, and I think it's something that's been happening a little bit more frequently. Ben, I mean, it's a big reason why we started to kind of professionalize a lot of our communications, hired a PIO. Because we realize that we're really kind of the source of information, boots on the ground. We don't have full-time fire departments out in the county, John. I mean, everybody's volunteer right now.
Correct.
And so we're kind of obviously they're super quick and they get there and get to work. But as far as getting word out to people, I mean, the sheriff's office is kind of it for a lot of those folks, along with emergency management.
Well, when those calls come up, those volunteer firemen, they're already real busy, and sometimes getting the social media part of it out is probably one of the latter things that they can do, and that's something that we've been able to jump on and get going on that, and I'm pretty proud of that because when the fires hit several years ago, everybody started to follow us and retweeting and doing all those things to get that information out because the farmers back then on that really assisted on putting that fire out with their farm equipment and disking and getting it under control.
Yeah, and it's a piece that we can play, I think, in the overall equation. Sometimes as deputies, John, maybe not so much you, but for me, that has no fire background at all, I feel a little bit helpless, other than just directing traffic or trying to give people directions.
Sure,
it's a part that we can play to help keep people safe.
It's a huge part. So if we bring up the Hallam fire in 2022, which was probably the largest one that we've seen in quite some time. Mm-hmm. I was working that day, obviously, and our role at the sheriff's office was obvious very quickly. It immediately turned from, getting to that fire scene. Obviously, they were using us to spot that fire.
Yeah.
So we were moving around that fire like crazy, just spotting that fire and getting that information out before the command staffs even started. It was none of that going on.
Yep.
And then very quickly turned into the evacuation process. The deputies were responsible for hitting all of these homes in the path of that fire and talking to those folks and getting those folks out of there. That was done by deputies and state patrolmen who were in the area. So a large fire like that, which is what we're kind of speaking about today, takes everybody's effort. It is not just volunteer firemen showing up. It's power companies. It's, the law enforcement in the area.
Yeah.
All of those folks jumped in. The farmers coming out with their discs and stuff like that, which was massive. So there's a role for everybody, and it happens very, very quickly.
Well, it was on a Sunday, too, and a lot of people were home.
Yeah.
Yes, thank goodness.
Yes.
Yeah, that is correct.
I think that's a big reason behind why we even wanted to do this episode, because this is not Southern California. Although, grass fires, wildfires happen here, they haven't happened, with the size and frequency that they've been lately, at least in my memory.
Sure. They haven't, but they're actually picking up because of the drought conditions that we're having.
Certainly.
With drought conditions and wind conditions, that is a recipe for disaster.
Well,
especially during harvest season, because everything's dry and all that. And
all the mechanical issues with the combines and discs.
We saw that up north in those two fires up in the Waverly and Raymond area this summer.
Yeah. Yep.
Those were all calls. And if you don't know what an all call is when that fire department shows up to fight that fire and they pull up and go, oh, crap, that is much bigger and the conditions are much worse than we thought.
We need some help.
They hit that all call button and then everybody and their mother is coming. Yep. So that's not like just give me these companies. That's give me everybody.
Now, that's a pretty big deal because
it's a huge deal.
Because you're sending all your resources in one spot at that time, and gosh knows something else could spark off.
Yes, and that's up to the individual command staffs of those departments like us. We sent specific rigs and left specific rigs at home to make sure that we had everything covered down in our district. So that's up to the command staffs of those departments to send what they're able to send.
Right, because you don't want to lose all your assets.
That's correct.
Well, I think being in Nebraska, we know what to do if there's a fire at our house. For the most part, we know what to do if there's a tornado. You practice those things in school.
Yeah, you go outside and look for it.
Well, yeah, sometimes that's the way it goes. But there's really not, other than doing just what you said, Ben, going outside and looking for it in a wildfire. We don't have a lot of history as just residents on what to do if there's a wildfire headed towards my house. So we're going to get into that a little bit. Before we do that, we wanted to just talk. You mentioned the recipe, but there is a recipe for fires. And so let's back up just a little bit on the fire science side of things. So when we're talking about why does a fire even burn in the first place? So help people understand what's needed.
Yeah, again, the science part of it needs three things. It's called the triangle. We call it the fire triangle, and it needs oxygen, fuel, and then it needs basically the heat, which creates our fire. So basically, what it means is a fire is combustion.
Okay,
that's what it is. And once that recipe gets together and something is combustible, it also then needs the oxygen and the fuel to flow.
Right.
So anytime, especially in the wildland environment, that could be natural or it could be human.
Yeah.
That creates this, right? It could be a flicked cigarette out the car door. It could be a lightning strike, which we see quite a bit.
Yep.
It could be a campfire that nobody put out when they left or didn't get it all the way out when we left.
Farm machinery.
Yep. Obviously, that's a really big deal. But probably the biggest deal that we see that people don't necessarily pay attention to is that campfire that they don't put all the way out.
Okay.
Or it is that burn permit.
Yep.
That they don't put all the way out or bury.
Okay.
Those embers can travel up to a mile.
Okay.
So if you get if you don't have a farm field around you, but there's one within a mile, the potential that ember reaches that dry corn at the end of the season is tremendous.
So that's what's starting the fire. Mm-hmm. And then you guys on the fire side, you're trying to sweep one of the legs on that stool to put it out, right?
Correct.
Because if you take one of those things
one
away,
of the three away, that fire is out.
Okay.
In our world, obviously, typically it is water.
Right.
That's what we utilize. But also in the wildland, and especially in the urban interface stuff that we deal with, which is basically wildland fires that you would see in your head, fields burning, but then you add that urban interface to it, which is then those homes around that area, right?
Yeah.
It turns that into an urban environment. We also utilize our tools. We'll do some brake lines and stuff like that, and we'll talk a little bit about that, how to prevent that around your own home. But we create those fire breaks, natural fire breaks, or man-made fire breaks, as well as water. That's what we use to fight these fires.
If you want a challenging career, a career where you can make a difference in your life, your family's life, and the lives of those in your community, come and join the Lancaster County Sheriff's Office. To learn more or to apply, visit us online at www.joinlso.com.
So it's right now it's January. There's snow on the ground. Obviously, a fire can start any time of the year, but we're not looking at super fire danger today. So what are things that people can do, now to prepare for fire season?
Sure.
When things are super dry, what can they be doing weeks, months ahead of time to better prepare themselves and their property?
Sure. Always have a plan to get out, right? That's the first thing.
Okay.
But if we're talking about prevention and keeping that fire from reaching your house, at this time of year when you're not mowing is a really big deal, but we're not mowing this time of year, right? You're going to want to start working on those gutters and those soffits, making sure all of that brush is out of that area.
Okay.
Right. We want to make sure if we're planting trees, if we're a new home and you're creating your life now and you're building your property, making it beautiful, that you understand the distances between those trees, where they are from the home. We call those ignition zones.
Okay.
So we want to keep those away from the house, certain distances.
So like if a fire's moving towards my house,
correct,
there's some distances that I can keep brush and things back to better protect my property.
Right. So what we think about, and we use the NFPA standard, but what we think about are the three zones. There's the immediate zone, the intermediate zone, and then the extended zone. That immediate zone is at 0 to 5 feet from your home, right? It's those trees that you put right along your walls there or whatnot to make your house look pretty right up at front, right? That super nice tree.
Okay.
And then you have that intermediate zone, which is usually right around that, 5 to 30 feet.
Okay.
And that's where you're going to want to start separating those trees, right? You can have lots of trees out there, but make sure that they have some distance between them so that they're not, if one of those trees starts on fire, the other 6 are okay, right?
Yeah, so we're taking care of them. We're just not letting them grow.
Right.
If they're in that zone.
Correct. And then as we move out, then that last zone, which is that extended zone, is at 30 to 100 feet.
Okay.
And really, to be honest with you, you're living out in that acreage community out there where you are kind of set your house into that tree line, or there's lots of homes out there that sit inside of those tree lines, or those large, prairie land where we got grass up 4 or 5 feet, right?
Yep.
You get lots of those out there. It's super beautiful and pretty, but that is extremely dangerous if you're allowing that fuel, that material to burn, come right up onto that house.
Okay.
Right? So you want to keep that material, that fuel, that fire fuel, at least 100 foot from the house.
Okay.
Typically, people do that with grass. Planted grass, irrigated grass is a great buffer between a fire.
Okay.
We had a deputy during that Hallam fire where that buffer actually worked out very, very well for them.
Okay.
So to keep that irrigated grass around your home is probably the best barrier you're going to have, unless you don't have grass and it's dirt. That works out too. But keeping that 100-foot barrier off that house is absolutely going to save your property, 100%.
So if I'm looking at keeping a barrier around my house, I want to go how far with like irrigated or at least green grass?
Yes. So that extended zone typically is 30 to 100 feet.
Okay.
So what we're looking
at least
for.
30 feet away from my house, I want some green grass to keep a fire off my house.
Nice moist ground, right?
Okay.
But then what we also have to worry about in that instance is that fire approaches that home, you're now dealing with those embers, right? Those embers, if it's approaching the home, that means your home is downwind, right? So that is coming towards you. So all of the things that are super important about those embers are keeping those leaves out of your gutters, right? Keeping, a lot of times, especially with the wind that we have in Nebraska, all of those leaves and those pine needles and everything pile up underneath your deck. Okay. And as those embers come through and they blow underneath your deck, guess what's going, right? because it's so dry and it's so nasty. Now your deck's on fire.
Yeah.
Okay. So you want to make sure all of that stuff is clear.
Okay.
So any debris that can come out from that tree line, the sticks and all that stuff that come from that.
Corn stalks, whatever.
Yes. You're going to want to make sure that all of that is cleared around your residence. And that's honestly is what's going to keep your house standing.
Okay. Sheriff, we had this last year some red flag warnings, which is the fire weather, is possible today. And we try to share those on our social media stuff to just keep people aware so they're not, burning unnecessarily. They're not having that fire pit in the driveway. They're not burning trash, those sorts of things. So what are some things, John, that we can do today to, if we see that tweet about a red flag warning, if we hear about it from the National Weather Service, I think a lot of us in Nebraska didn't really pay attention to that until the last, few years when we started having these big fires. Mm-hmm. What should we do when today is a bad day to have a fire?
So
not have a fire.
Well, that's number one.
Yeah, that is common sense, number one, right?
One of the frustrating things I see all the time is people smoking and throwing out the cigarettes.
Yeah, discarding stuff
and that just drives me absolutely
and it's
nuts.
And that's something. I mean, you can get your car stopped for that. It's
you get a ticket for it, right?
Depositing burning rubbish on a roadway, and that's illegal.
Right. I think honestly, the biggest thing that will help us with this is the civilian population, our people in our community, holding each other accountable for these things, right? Because we can't be everywhere. We're not going to see everything.
Right.
So holding each other accountable and understanding what their actions could possibly do, especially in these types of conditions, I think is huge.
Okay.
Right. Contacting us at the sheriff's office so that we can at least go educate at a minimum.
Yeah.
You go educate, right? There's lots of pictures and lots of stories that these deputies can tell these folks that could certainly make them change their mind about whether it is burning when they shouldn't be burning, trying to burn their trash because it's not that big of a deal. It's in a barrel.
Yep.
I know it's in a barrel, but what's coming out?
It always drives me nuts when the people try to get a burn permit from the local fire chief and they don't get one and they burn anyway.
Yeah.
And that just,
Happens.
there's a reason why the local fire chief's not issuing those burn permits, and it's usually on those red flag days.
Yep.
And then people try to sneak that in anyway.
And we make it out to a lot of those fires as cops, and the homeowner's surprised to see that they're getting a ticket before we leave.
Yeah. And it's thought of so lowly that sometimes, believe it or not, I have written a burn ban violation to a firefighter.
Oh.
It's just sometimes people just aren't thinking about it. They're not understanding what the requirements are in the state of Nebraska. There is always, every single day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, a burn ban in this state.
Yeah.
You cannot just openly burn when you feel like it. It is not possible.
Are burning barrels still allowed, John?
They are. They are.
Okay.
Yep.
So that's not considered an open fire, though.
Correct. But there are requirements. So you want to put that lid on that burn barrel and stuff like that. So you can. We're trying to eliminate those embers.
Keep the embers from
in a red flag, right, where that is stopped, you cannot do that. You have to pay attention to that. So before you do those types of things, I had a gentleman come to me the other day at the fire station and just asked, he's like, it's so nice out, I want to have a bonfire. Well, of course you can have a bonfire, right? All the parks, everybody has those fire pits, right? You can have a bonfire on your acreage, of course, but you have to pay attention to what's happening. You're still responsible for anything that fire that happens. So if it's a great day and an ember takes off on you and goes and lights the neighbor's cornfield on fire, guess who's paying for that?
Right.
Right. So
well-intentioned or not.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, we want to make sure that we pay attention to that. There's always a burn ban. You must always request a permit when you want to burn something other than
your enclosed fire pit, right? Kind of thing, right?
In your burn barrel.
Yeah.
And that requires a very simple process. What people need to understand, though, too, is every fire department, every fire chief has their own process. We fall within the state fire marshal's office, but there could be little variances in each fire department's deal. Some people only burn on weekends.
Okay.
Some people only do this, but you can never burn certain things like trash can never be burned. Rubber can never be burned. Treated material can never be burned. So where we're at in Hickman, the only thing that we're allowed to burn is brush.
Okay.
Cut down a tree, logs, stuff like that. That's the only thing that I will write a permit for.
Okay.
When it's regards to brush piles. Everything else they have to take to the landfill.
And those days could be based just on the staffing you have at your fire departments or things like that. And when you're, if you've only got enough people to fight fires on the weekend, or at least that's your preferred.
We try to be very good about it because of the the environment that we live in, right? Being out in the country, lots of trees being cut down, lots of stuff like that. So we try to be very open to that. I don't have specific days that I do it, but I won't put 5 burn permits in one day. You see what I'm saying? I cut back. So
as far as stopping fires from starting themselves, what are some other things that, families, I mean, some of us have little kids, if there's a tornado, I go to the basement.
Yes.
What do I do if, there's not a fire that nobody has a fire pit within 5 miles of my house, but all of a sudden, I'm hearing on the news that there's a wildfire that's headed north.
Right. One sparks off towards you.
What am I doing as far as preparing, or what do I need to have ready as a family in the county?
Sure. So, having an exit plan is a big deal.
Okay.
Right. We all have those for tornadoes, and we all have those for interior house fires, right? You tell your kids how to get out of the house or whatnot. Now, if one is barreling down on you, it's the exact opposite of a tornado thing, right? We tell shelter in place, get down to the lowest end and find a corner and stay put, whatnot. Yeah. This is the exact opposite. You want to encourage your children and your family members and everybody else that distance is your friend.
Okay.
Not staying put.
Okay.
Right? So you want to make sure that you have a plan to evacuate your home quickly.
Yeah.
Right? And that is simply just being able to bring yourself back from your property. That's the hardest thing in the world. I couldn't imagine having to tell everybody that we're leaving and you got to leave everything there, right? So that's the biggest deal is having an understanding with your family and your kids and your mom and dad and whoever else it may be that there may be a point that we have to go and we have to leave everything.
Well,
and that's
some of that's
behavior.
Really hard because people have horses, people have pets, and they have all those that they don't want to leave, and they sometimes they get in troubles because they're trying to save those, and they stay too long.
Human nature. We ran into that a lot in Hallam.
Yeah.
Right. People were just not leaving. They're not leaving their stuff. They're not leaving their animals.
Yep.
And so, it'll be a constant battle. But when we're talking about kids who don't have choices, who need to listen to mom and dad, right? You want to make sure that plan is in place so that you're not looking for Timmy.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And wasting that time as that fire is moving towards you, the plan's already in place.
So, I mean, on a day that there is a red flag warning or something, whether we actually have a go bag or whether we're at least just thinking about it, I mean, if it's time to go, you got time to grab like 2 things and you're out the door.
Right.
So
pre-planning that go bag, obviously that, in our situation here, it doesn't need to have food or water in it or anything like that. We can go drive to Casey's when we leave the house.
Right.
Right. What you want in that go bag is very important things like DD-214s, Social Security cards.
Right.
Having that already set in your house or in your safe, wherever you already have it, having that stuff already bunched together to where it's just a grab, a satchel or a bag or whatever the case may be, and just taking that with you in a backpack is obviously the best way to do it.
Right.
Right. You want it secure, so put it in something small that fits in the safe. But any of those financial documents that are important, any of those personal documents that are important, you got grandma's picture you don't want to get rid of, throw it in the backpack.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And then you take that. Everything else can be dealt with. Everything else can be, bought again.
Right.
To be honest with you.
Yep.
Well, in best case scenario, you come back and you put your bag away.
Correct.
Worst case scenario, you made it out with the things that are important to you, your kids, your pets, hopefully, those important documents to put things back together.
Right.
Yeah.
Credit cards, you need credit cards and a little bit of cash. And
Yep. It's a tragedy to lose your home. Right. It's an extreme tragedy to lose a life because of a vase.
Yeah.
Or something like that, to where it's so heavy you can't get it out, or you're trying to get something that, might be important to you. We get it, but it's just not that important. And that's a difficult thing. I get it.
Yeah. We encourage people to monitor, our social media. We try to share this stuff as quick as we get it. Most of our like breaking news stuff we share on X. That's at LSO Nebraska. Lincoln Lancaster County Emergency Management, they also do a really good job of sharing fire information specifically and any threats that are ongoing to the county. Local media does a really good job. The media sources in Lincoln do a really good job with featuring this stuff. I know the Voice News has photojournalists that are out in the field in places that are outside of Lincoln. They do a fantastic job during the year too. So just really encourage people to make sure that they're listening to that on a day that we've got active fires that are going on. Just pay attention to your surroundings. If you see that red flag warning come up on your weather app on your phone, it means something.
Sure. Yeah. Scanner radios. are big. Lots of homes out in the county have scanner radios. Listen to those.
Yep.
Those will definitely help you. But don't forget about your instincts. Right. If something don't feel right, it ain't right. Right. Just move on. Don't wait for somebody to come tell you. If it doesn't look like you need to be there, we would encourage you to just go away for a while. And if everything's fine, come on back.
Yep.
Right. Once you're cleared to come back into that neighborhood, but use your instincts, use your mom instincts, your dad instincts, and just move on your own, and then come back when everything's okay.
So I want to bring it back around full circle to that fire triangle that you were talking about earlier. Mm-hmm. How do firefighters attack wildfires?
So in the county, it's a little bit different. So in the county out here, we generally immediately mutualate our departments for help because we don't have water in the county, right?
Right. We don't just have a fire hydrant at the end of the block, right?
Correct. So what we have to do is we have to import that water.
Okay.
That water's got to come from other departments. Mm-hmm. So we immediately contact departments to start sending their tankers and their manpower. We only bring certain trucks, right? We're not bringing a fire truck to a wildland fire, right? Okay. That truck's not going to do me any good unless we have some structures that we want to protect, and we did that in Hallam, right?
Uh-huh.
So we'll bring those fire trucks, we'll place them in driveways that we think are a threat, and then we'll try to protect that home as best we can.
Okay.
But typically they're going to be those pickup trucks with the water tanks in the back, right? And then the large tankers with the water in them. The issue with that is you got to know and understand that when we do that, they're not all coming from one place, right?
Right.
So these trucks are coming this way, as opposed to just everybody coming in one direction. So it's very dangerous on the road as well, right? Mm-hmm. And I know we lost a firefighter back west because of a situation like this, where it became a road hazard very recently.
Yeah.
It is very dangerous. Obviously, anytime anybody's code 3 in their vehicle, it's a dangerous situation. But now you add smoke, and you add flames, and you add panic.
Yep.
It's just a dangerous thing. So just remember that when you are leaving your homes, be very cautious.
And 10,000 pounds of water pushing.
Correct. They don't stop on dimes by any means.
Yeah.
So just remember that when you're exiting your home and you're trying to get somewhere, be very cautious. Make sure you crest those hills, clear on your side, right? You want to be overly cautious when you're leaving areas like that. Yeah. And then what we do when we get there, we try to develop a plan as quickly as possible without being able to see everything. And that's really the most difficult part. That's why we've kind of added drones to our system to see those types of things. But we do the best we can to coordinate all of these departments, typically on the same radio channel, and we start attacking that thing from its source.
Mm-hmm. So you're putting water with grass rigs out. You're trying to
contain that thing.
Okay.
We'll shoot as far away as we can. We'll shoot up ahead of it if possible.
Okay.
We'll try to cut those lines. We try to use our roads, our county roads, as man-made fire breaks, right?
Okay.
So we'll set those trucks up and watch those roads and hope to see if that fire is stopped by our man-made county road.
Right.
If not, it's what we call fighting from the black.
Okay.
And what that means is we bring our trucks in the areas that have already burned, right?
Yeah.
We don't want to be down range, right?
Yeah.
We want to be above it. We want to fight it as we're basically chasing the fire. Okay. So we want to fight those fires from the black.
And these days when you've got 60, 70 mile an hour winds,
it's
that makes it tough, right?
Right. It's tough to do. Okay. The manpower's not there for something like that, which is, I'm sure, obviously is what's happening in California.
Well, the roads don't help either because it just jumps that like it's not even there.
It does. And that is wind-based, right? Okay. A lot of what you see in wind-based fires like that, where they're moving very quickly, is what we call spotting fires. There's 3 fires. There's a surface fire, a crown fire, and a spotting fire. Those are the 3 things that you'll see in a wildland situation. The surface fire being that prairie grass, that 3-4 foot tall prairie grass is just moving right through because of the wind, right? And then that crown fire is those fires that hit those treetops and then crown those treetops, and then it makes it much difficult to do, which is what we saw in Olive Creek.
Okay.
Right? Once that fire, we call it laddering. It's called ladder fuel.
Yeah, those are the big flames you're seeing from like miles.
So the trees have the branches that come down.
Yeah.
That is called ladder fuel. So that the prairie grass fire hits that tree, hits that ladder, and then it goes up into the trees.
Okay.
And then it jumps tree to tree to tree to tree, and that's a crown fire. Mm-hmm. And then the last one is spotting fires, which is the embers that break loose. There were many, many fires in that Hallam fire where we felt like we were doing really good, and then we look up, and then 300-400 yards out of nowhere in the middle of a cornfield, another fire pops up. And it's because an ember traveled, landed in that field, and boom, there goes another one.
Got it.
No, I remember Monday or Tuesday after those fires driving down there, and some of those tree stumps were still smoking.
Oh yeah, and it'll do it quite from time. Once that fire gets in there and settles in there, those trees will smolder for months, weeks, sometimes weeks or months, depending on how old and beat up that tree is. Yep. Yeah.
Well, before we let you go, I know there's some kind of these are probably easy for a firefighter to answer, but they're harder questions for those of us that are not firefighters. So I'm gonna do a little Q&A for you. So, the big ones coming out of California is, hey, the houses are all gone, but the trees are still standing. Like, what's going on? Why does that happen?
There's a couple of issues there. One, speed of the fire, for sure, right? So I kind of gave you this example the other day, especially in dry conditions. It's kind of like running a lighter across your arm and you have hair on your arm. Yep. And the hair burns on your arm, but your skin doesn't. Okay. Because you move it across real fast. Yep. Right? That's very similar to that situation where those trees, they'll just burn the ends off or whatnot, and then it's going to continue to travel where the fuel's at, right? It's just going to jump from fuel to fuel to fuel until it finds the money pot of fuel, which would be a home. Right. Right? So the big difference in why that happens is our trees, especially healthy trees, are nothing but water. Right. From the roots to the top, it is moisture. Yeah. Right? A house is the exact opposite. A house is nothing but dry wood. Yep. And other combustibles. And other things that are in that home that create basically a mother load for fuel in a fire. So that tree has its own self-defense mechanism, which is the moisture. But it also has the wind helping it pass through. Okay. That's why you'll see those trees on fire, but the home next to it is gone. Okay. That's exactly why.
Next question. You see this sometimes like on YouTube or whatever. So would it work to stick it out on my roof with a garden hose?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
And the reason
we don't recommend that.
Yes. And the reason for it is, and there's some pretty basic answers that I think everybody knows, but when you're involved into a fire, the heat goes which way? Up. It goes up. And if you're standing on a roof on a fire, on a surface level fire, where's all that heat going?
To you.
Right to you. Yeah. Right? You are not going to survive that. That is a massive amount of heat. Okay. I understand why people want to save their stuff, but I promise you the amount of water coming out of your weld garden hose or whatever it is that is not soaking that material enough that heat is not going to take over. Okay. The heat will take over on that fire and it will take it will get into that dry wood and off you go. You just can't soak that house enough. Yeah. It's impossible.
All right. Next one. How fast does a wildfire, or how fast can a wildfire actually move?
So this is important too. So a really fast moving wildland fire is going to move between 12 and 15 miles an hour. Okay. The one thing that people don't necessarily understand is it's the exact opposite. So a lot of times people think, well, when it's moving downhill, it's moving fast because we know if we run downhill, we're faster than running uphill, right? Yeah. It is the exact opposite in a fire, especially a wildland fire. The fire will double in speed uphill. Okay. Because the flames travel up.
It's got more fuel that way.
It's grabbing fuel as it goes. So that speed is actually doubled. Wow. Traveling uphill. Okay. So if you see it coming downhill, it's just cruising. All right. But if you live at the base of the next hill up, or not the base, at the top of the next hill up, every minute that you watch that, you can double it coming to you. Okay. And people don't understand that. So they think they've got plenty of time when they don't. Okay. So just remember, that's interesting. You live at the top of a hill, you are actually in a tremendous amount of danger because that fire, once that hits that base of that hill and comes up, it's going to be there in no time.
So in 50, 60 mile an hour winds, I mean, that fire can scoot
really fast.
Well, then the ambers can get going and then
spot fire
way ahead of it.
Well, yeah, it could come up 100 yards above and then, you know what I'm saying? So it's very dangerous. So understand that uphill is worse. Yeah.
Sometimes you see firefighters starting fires.
Yes. Backfires. Yep. We call those backfires. That's exactly right. So what we're doing is wind shifts all the time on us, nonstop. So we're constantly monitoring what the wind is doing. If we can get a good wind that shifted on us, we will start those backfires. And all we're doing necessarily is just creating a fire break. Yep. We're burning that grass in front of that fire so that as it slowly, gradually works towards that, it has no more fuel. So we're creating an offense, basically. That would be an offensive move for us. Okay. Where we create that fire break, we put rigs around it to where we know we can control that section of fire, burn that off, and then as that uncontrolled fire scene moves towards you, it now no longer has fuel and kills itself.
Similar to a farmer with a disc implement.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. We're just killing fuel.
All right. So that kind of brings us to this one then. Where do volunteer firefighters come from?
They come from your everyday folks that you live with around you.
Yeah.
Most of which live out in the county.
Yeah.
They come from backgrounds. I can tell you, I'll talk about my own. I've got mechanics. I've got nurses.
Yep.
I've got a medical student. I've got, oh my gosh, I got National Guard members.
Yeah.
They're just everyday people with normal jobs that just have committed themselves to be amazing people. And they wake up at 2 a.m. when they got to be at work at 6.
Yep.
To go handle one of your bad days for them. And man, I tell you what, coming from a paid service to a volunteer service, there's always that little kind of weird thing, like, oh my gosh, they're just volunteers. I was humbled tremendously when I started volunteering for the Hickman Fire Department on how wrong I was about these people. And I'll admit it, and I admit it all the time. These people are special.
Yeah.
They are special people that have huge hearts. And
Very dedicated.
oh my gosh, they are special people, and I cannot be more proud of not only my guys down here and gals, but everybody else that comes and helps us.
Yeah.
They see the same things we do. They see the same things that LFR does.
Yep.
They ain't being paid.
Yeah.
So they go out, they train, they work hard, and they do the same things that everybody else does.
Yep.
They're impressive. That's where they come from. Just good people.
So if I'm listening to this and I've got zero experience, which I don't have any experience in fighting a fire, but if something from this episode caught my attention and say, hey, you know what, I can't do it every day, but there's some days I want to be a part of that.
Yes.
What can people do to get involved?
So volunteer firefighting is a dying breed, and we'll take all the help that we can get, right? And,
Okay.
and we've got volunteer firefighting to a point that we can train our own folks. We don't have to send you to an academy like I went to in California or anything else like that. We can train you within the house.
Okay.
And if anybody wants to volunteer, they just need to reach out to their local folks.
Yeah.
Everybody knows a volunteer fireman in their community. Reach out to them, tell them that you're interested, and they will get you on the path of within 6 months being a qualified firefighter because the training is out there.
Yeah.
And being able to help their community. It's a very simple process. A lot of folks think that it takes a ton of time out of your day, and it does sometimes, depending on the situation. But for the most part, it's a phenomenal team that takes care of itself.
Yeah.
And the time commitment isn't as big as most people think.
Awesome.
So I encourage anybody who is thinking about this or just wants to volunteer, whether it's on the medical side.
And there are a
fire.
lot of employers who will work with their employees who are firefighters. And I know some guys that worked at a plant, and they responded to all the first aid calls within the plant. But when a fire call came out, the plant let them go on their paid time
Yeah.
to go fight fires. So
There's lots of companies out there that do that. We've got some folks in our department that do that. So the love is out there.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah.
It's the time that isn't necessarily out there.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, how many calls did you take last year?
Hickman took 320 calls, and that's
just about one a day.
lot of calls. It's a lot of calls for service for a non-full-time department.
Yeah.
We are the second highest in Lancaster County to Waverly.
Okay.
Waverly takes a boatload of calls, and it's because they're bigger and they should be. They got a lot of stuff to cover there. So it's difficult to manage that. We went from 150 calls to 300 calls in 1 year when the bypass came through.
Wow.
is that right?
That was when it changed. We had a big jump during COVID. It hit 300,
Yep.
and it never looked back.
Okay.
So even though COVID is gone, the calls for service are not.
Well, Hickman's been a growing community too.
Very fast growing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're making plans as we move forward to combat that and what we can do to make sure that we can do that. And if you don't mind, I will plug a program that we have to help us with that. And we call it the ODM program, or the Out of District Member Program.
Okay.
And what that is, that was designed to really reach out to those EMTs in the Lincoln area who are working in this field, who want to come down and take a different type of call for service.
So even if I live in Lincoln, you're saying I don't have to live in your fire district in Hickman or in Raymond or I can still be
sir.
involved in
Absolutely.
a fire department.
Absolutely. I just looked on my cameras, and I have an ODM sitting at the station right now waiting to take a call.
Okay.
And that's what it's about, is getting those EMTs in Lincoln to come down and commit some time to the station. we give them the opportunity to really work those styles of calls, because you're not an EMT unless you want to help.
Right.
And you want those types of calls. So we're providing that to them, but they're also providing service to us and making sure that we have somebody who is at the station and available for a medical call when that comes while I'm at work or somebody else is at work. So it's kind of a you scratch your back and we'll scratch yours kind of situation. And just, utilizing that resource that Lincoln has for us. So works out really well.
Sheriff, Chief, closing thoughts today on...
John hit the nail on the head. These folks are just amazing.
Yeah.
They're not getting paid for what they do. They're risking their lives. They're giving of their time. And they're out at 2:00 in the morning on a medical call, and then they got to be at work at 6 or 8, They're
precious people.
It's tough. And my hat is it's always been off to those folks.
Well, another thing is a lot of times the ones responding know the people that they're responding to go help, and that would have to be very, very hard.
Yeah, that's right in your hometown.
It's a curse, but it's a blessing as well. Because I tell you what, you'll never treat Ethel, who you've known for 30 years, better than anybody else.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, and when Ethel sees you walk in, it is a different environment. They really feel at peace regardless of what's taking place. So it has a little bit of both in there for sure.
Well, Hickman Fire Chief, Deputy John Brady, we appreciate you being on here.
And
don't forget
Captain
boat
John
captain.
Brady.
Oh, boat captain as well. Episode 12,
Diver.
LSO Marine Unit.
Yep.
Yes.
We'll get into the diving later.
Okay. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely.
That is all the time that we have for today's episode of the 902 podcast. We appreciate you tuning in. Be sure to follow us on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you enjoy listening to podcasts. You can also reach out to us on social media at LSO Nebraska on Facebook, X, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube. To learn more about career opportunities at the Lancaster County Sheriff's Office, be sure to visit us at joinlso.com. You can also reach out to us via email at lso@lancaster.ne.gov. We hope to catch you on a future episode of the 902 podcast. Thanks for listening.